right now, we are very happy to have in studio Battle Creek's very own city manager, Rebecca Fleury. Good morning.
Good morning, Tim.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you.
Big plans tonight.
Yes, exciting dinner plans with my husband.
Yes, yeah, but that's good. Yeah, I have been trying to get downtown in Battle Creek and eat more lately, and there's a lot going on down there. We're not there yet, but there's certainly some positive things happening downtown.
Oh my gosh, yes. A lot of the restaurants have Valentine's specials tonight. I know Barista Blues does, Kitchen Proper does, Griffin. So I think we'll see a lot of people dining out tonight in downtown Battle Creek.
I kind of got a hankering for shepherd's pie. It's been, that's such a nice winter dish, at least for me. And
it's
plus,
warming.
With the Irish in me, anything with a lot of potatoes, I go for it. But we had John Hart in here, the Downtown Development Director, earlier this week. It was kind of fun to talk to John because he's got a Battle Creek background. And you spent some time here as a youngster, too, because your dad worked here.
I did. As a teenager, I worked in Battle Creek at the Fellpush in Urbandale, and I was a volunteer at Lila Hospital.
Oh, okay. So you remember the downtown walking mall?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, and I told him it's kind of like Sears with their catalog. They discontinued their catalog just about the time, where they could have evolved that into internet sales, and look what happened. And I think with malls was this great idea at the very tail end of the 1950s and through the 60s. But then all of a sudden, malls outside of the downtown area came along, and all of a sudden, pedestrian malls downtown didn't look like such a good idea. And so, they took them back out. They first in Kalamazoo and here in Battle Creek. And, and my point with John was, it kind of set a lot of communities back a little bit, even though they had the best of intentions.
I agree, because downtowns were the place for people to go and gather for a variety of things, whether it was food or shopping. A lot of faith-based organizations were in the downtown, and that did change when things kind of sprawled out to the suburbs, particularly with those large retail malls.
Yeah, I was so encouraged here a couple summers ago when this Pokemon Go thing was huge, and I'm sitting down at Clara's outside, listening to the music, having dinner, and there's 1,000 people rummaging up and down the linear parkway next to the river and around there. And I was just thinking, wouldn't this be something if we could get to this every day, have this kind of a bustling downtown?
Agree. And I think the key is for us to get more people living downtown so that, you have to go out to get, the things that you need daily, not just for work, but things that you need daily. And I still see those diehard Pokemon fans downtown on a linear path looking for their treasures.
Yep. There's not 1,000 of them, but you still see them.
Yep.
And it's great. And our Heritage Tower project is coming along. It sounds like they may be ready to put up some drywall pretty quick, and before you know it, they'll have one of those units done so they can start marketing it.
I agree. They are looking towards starting to offer those units in the spring of 2019. And while it doesn't feel like spring is coming I'm sure. It's 34 days. Our street supervisor reminds me of when spring is coming. But yes, it will be exciting to see one of those units.
And my sense is, though, that we don't quite have the same momentum with the McCanley Plaza project. Do you have any knowledge about how that's coming along with that transition?
I think they have run into a few hiccups. Most recently, I know of one intimately because last week we had the Michigan Municipal Executives in Battle Creek. That was about 200, almost 300 city managers from all over the state at a conference in...
You guys sit around playing SimCity all night long?
No. But they had a pipe break in the ballroom. So I think there has been some mechanical issues that have set them back a little bit, but I do know they're working hard to get that Hilton flag up. But there's a lot of standards that come with a Hilton flag, and so they're working through those. I know that the room renovations have received very positive comments. Now they need to finish the lobby, the pool area, fitness area, those types of things to bring that all up to Hilton standards.
Sure. Well, let me shift to the city budget now. It's very confusing to a lot of us, and I really haven't figured it out. But something happened with state law that resulted in a budget shortfall here. Can you explain that?
I will give it my best shot. It is a complicated thing, but really what happened was the state of Michigan eliminated the collection of personal property tax for industrial and manufacturing businesses. That really took effect in calendar year 2016. But lawmakers recognized that you can't just take away a fairly substantial source of revenue for local government without putting something in its place. So there is a very complicated formula in which to reimburse communities for what was lost through personal property tax. But there is no one community that looks exactly like another. And so I think when you try to do a broad brush approach like that, there are going to be some positive unintended consequences, and there are going to be some negative unintended consequences. And I think for Battle Creek, unfortunately, it has not been a positive. And we've been working very hard with Treasury and our state legislators, both previous ones, now Senator Bison was Representative Bison, as well as Senator Knopf, to try to understand that reimbursement formula for Battle Creek, because we were seeing such a wide fluctuation in what we were getting. And for us, it made it a little more complicated in that those reimbursements come in November and we're halfway through our fiscal year, which starts in July. So it's been a learning experience watching what has happened to Battle Creek's reimbursement. So, for example, our first reimbursement was $3.8 million. Which was very close to what we had calculated. You know, there's a lot of forms that you have to fill out in order to get this reimbursement that's technically for essential services that were being supported by the personal property tax in the previous tax structure. And so they had come up with a calculation, a formula, a percentage for each community that was individualized. And that seemed right for Battle Creek, that $3.8 million. Not assuming that there was any sort of mistake until the next November when the payment was received of $1.1 million. That's a very large shift, 3.8 to 1.1.
Yeah.
And again, it was in November. So we were already down halfway through our fiscal year. So we started really asking Treasury, what is happening? You know, this is a huge swing. What should we expect going forward? You know, we budgeted very similar to the payment we got the first time, and that has left us a hole. And so, you know, in Treasury, there's always new people coming in and out, and they had a new group of Treasury employees analyzing the PPT reimbursement formula and felt that they had made a mistake in Battle Creek's first distribution. They didn't tell us if they felt they had made a mistake until they issued only 1.1. And that was the frustrating part. And I understand this is complicated. And they felt they had made a mistake in that first year and they had corrected itself in the second year. But we had already budgeted anticipating a larger amount. And so that left a $2 million hole.
And you mentioned former Senator Knopf and Representative Bison. Those guys and other lawmakers got kind of dug into this in the lame duck session, gave us some relief.
Yep, and that was probably the third time we had gone to try to get some relief and understand. And I want to mention Senator at that time, Representative Maturin was really helpful also. Somebody who came from kind of property appraisal and assessing, who gets how those taxes are calculated. And there was a lot of communities that had good news and bad news. And how do we figure that out? Because we rely on that. I mean, for us, real property is, it's about a 34% chunk of our general fund. That's a large amount of revenue to have to have a $2 million hole in that is a problem. So that second year when we were short $2 million, we worked with Treasury right up until May of that year, knowing our fiscal year closes June 30th. And we actually had a meeting in Battle Creek with Treasury, Representative Maturin, Senator Knopf at that time, the Michigan Municipal League, city staff. We all got around a table and said, help us understand that. Okay, if you're saying that this is an error, what is it going to be going forward? And Senator Knopf recognized it's too late in the fiscal year to give a hole like this to Battle Creek. And so he and Representative Maturin were very instrumental in getting us that $2 million to kind of fill the hole for that second year of reimbursement that helped us in our last fiscal year. And so we thought we understood, okay, so if it's going to be 1.1, there were some other corrections that we worked with Treasury on. Because we use so many economic development tools and we have several tax increment financing districts, those are layers of economic tools on top of each other that this law just has a difficult time recognizing and reimbursing accordingly. And so when I was saying that Treasury had a new interpretation of how Battle Creek's reimbursement should come, it came in the effect that any reimbursement for personal property tax going to the TIF districts would be subtracted from the city's essential service. That's the new interpretation from Treasury. So we got 3.8, but anything that the TIF districts in Battle Creek got were subtracted out, which is why we got to a 1.1 figure. can't necessarily say I agree with that philosophically, understand that that is Treasury's interpretation, and I think there is still some room for us to work with the legislature and Treasury to help them understand just what that looks like for Battle Creek, because we have very active TIF districts. And again, the help that Maturin and Bison and Knopf's gave us really did help the TIF districts in their reimbursement formulas, not so much the general fund. So then fast forward to this November of 18, and the reimbursement we received was $858,000 from the state. So not even the 1.1.
Wow.
So I think we decided at that particular point, we had done all we could for that particular point in time. We have to have a balanced budget by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. That is why we started a process of finding the $2.4 million that we weren't going to get back, at least for this fiscal year, in our current general fund budget.
When we come back, we'll look at what cuts will be made, how you got to that figure, and I want to ask you, what's your best guess on next year? I don't think this stuff was in Sim City back when I remember playing it.
No.
It's pretty complicated stuff, like you said, but I think I understand it a lot better. Thanks for explaining it. Battle Creek City Manager Rebecca Fleury is our guest this morning on the morning show. We're talking about the city budget right now. So we did not get what we'd even expected or hoped from the state, so had to take some drastic action. And again, as you mentioned, Rebecca, this all comes right in the middle of a fiscal year. So you really, didn't have a lot of time to make up for that and make that correction. That's got to be tough.
No, it does make it really tough, because ultimately we had a 5-month window in order to find $2.4 million, which ended up being the difference. And I have to give a lot of credit to our staff from in the finance department and in all the departments who really rolled up their sleeves and took a deep dive into the services that we provide and the resources we need to provide those to help us balance our current fiscal year, which would end June 30.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a big chunk of that budget's going to be in public safety and fire and police service.
Yep. Police and fire take about 63% of our entire general fund budget, and that's not unique. Battle Creek's not unique. It's because they employ a great number of people in those two departments. And so that's why the reduction amounts in those departments are larger than some, because they are a bigger percentage of the general fund budget. But we tried not to only have this as a percentage reduction. We're committed to the priority-based budgeting project. The community and our elected officials have helped us establish what our priorities are for services. And we use that when we think about having to reduce services. So it's a deeper discussion and exercise than just you need to find this amount of dollars. They really had to go back and look at all the services that we provide and the costs to do that.
So what are some of the ways that we'll be getting down, getting to that number that we need?
A lot of it has to do with not filling vacant positions. So any current vacant positions throughout all of the departments will not be filled or funded in this current fiscal year, and we will look and see what that looks like for next fiscal year. There was, some minor changes in training. Where of course you reduce things like training, but a lot of the savings came in vacant positions. Now, the original proposals that departments came up with had other positions that could be affected, either reduction of hours or elimination of positions that actually had persons in them. And we did what we could administratively to minimize that. So we were able to only affect vacant positions and not actual positions. And then we took really close look at things like transit services, and there were some deep cuts proposed for transit, but I think there was a lot of input received from the public that the commissioners heard, so they asked us not to go forward with those cuts at this particular time. And then in order to do that, to fill that, they gave a permission on a one-time basis this fiscal year to use our fund balance, which is our rainy day fund, in order to balance the budget for our current fiscal year 19.
A lot of people do depend on transit. It's their only way to get to places they have to be. And it's also a big part of what we're trying to do downtown and bring people to the downtown area, live in the downtown area. So
you're right.
It's good that we were able to not have to cut that. One way that I think every business looks at is eliminating overtime as a way to cut, and that's something that the chief says they'll be probably doing too. It'll be only absolutely necessary overtime that's approved.
Yes, and overtime is a big line item for both the police and fire. And as I said, kudos to both Chief Sturdivant and Chief Blacker for working with their teams to find ways to reach their kind of targeted amount while keeping a very high level of service. We worked. Kudos to Chief Sturdivant, who's relatively new to our organization, and we have to put him through this budget reduction exercise. But he did a really good job working with his firefighters and with the fire union to come up with some very needed and helpful assistance to get us to those reduction numbers. And the same with Chief Blacker. And I think what they heard, what the commissioners heard in our workshops around these budget reductions were things like a downtown officer position and specialty assignments like the gang suppression unit, and training around our CIT needs and the mental health issues are important. And while we understand we have to be fiscally responsible, is there a way to continue those at some level and not completely reduce those? And I think that Chief Blacker heard that message from the commissioners and are doing his best to do that.
Yeah, and what I keep hearing is that everybody in city government is willing to step up and tighten their belt. It's going to be a little bit tough until all the dust clears on all of this budget stuff. I see the president just put a golf simulator in the office, and I bet you there's no golf simulator now for city manager Rebecca Fleury.
No, but it is kind of funny you say that because we were able to get a golf simulator for the Binder Park golf course. Ron is a very good barterer, and so it's kind of funny you mentioned that.
Well, maybe we get the president to come out and use it. Well, it kind of defeats the purpose. But no, well, that's good. I want to ask you about next year. Then, when will we have any idea what the state is going to give the city of Battle Creek this year, Treasury, or are we just kind of in the dark and guessing right now?
Well, that's a good question. We're working with the new administration in Lansing. So Governor Whitmer and the new treasurer, we certainly have started conversations understanding their philosophy around the tax structure in Michigan, and particularly the personal property tax reimbursement formulas. And those are kind of intro conversations right now. We have some planned later in March that I think will be more in-depth, specific to Battle Creek. I'm excited about those. But I think for now, while we anticipate a potential additional distribution of personal property tax reimbursement in May, we will go forward with a very small number. So if $858,000 was what we got in November of 18, we may budget $500,000 for our fiscal year 2020 budget and balance on, so if we had a $50 million general fund budget last year, take that $2 million out and balance on a $48 million general fund budget. But you're right. Right now, we're doing a lot of forecasting because we just don't know, but we certainly understand to aim low and not high with that number.
This community has always taken advantage of opportunities to capture tax dollars and use it for things. That's when you allude to the TIF districts. Is that something that we may not be able to do anymore?
That's a good question. Those are very powerful and helpful tools, and they have helped Battle Creek be very successful. The Fort Custer Industrial Park is a prime example of a highly successful TIF district. And, those are tools that once they go away, they usually don't come back. So I don't think that it would be a dissolving of TIF districts, because what they provide from the economic development perspective is also a help to the city. No, we never anticipated that those would be subtractions for the city's general fund, but we think we can work within that structure. Some of the things we said during this budget reduction time was, if the TIF districts were going to be made more whole than the general fund, there are things that the TIF districts could use to support the city. One of the things we talked about is a downtown officer, because the DDA in the downtown is a TIF district. So if they are getting assistance in Treasury's interpretations and from the help that we got from Senator Knopf at that time, then we can use that to offset some things in the general fund, whether it be downtown maintenance, a downtown police officer, or some things of those that would be eligible TIF expenditures that currently the general fund is covering.
Well, sounds like a lot of ideas, a lot of options on the table for the next time around, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon, as soon as you know a little bit more about what it's going to look like then.
We expect to have our public meetings on the fiscal year 20 budget in the month of May, so please watch for those. Those are open to the public, and we appreciated the public that came out during this budget reduction time. Employees and our neighbors came out, and we need that input, and we hope that continues during our next budget process.
Rebecca Fleury, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Tim.